The sun hung low over the Arizona desert, bleeding its last light across the sand and stone. Heat shimmered off the ground like a ghost refusing to fade. A lone cowboy rode through that silence, a weary figure in a dust-stained hat, his horse dragging tired hooves through the sand. He'd been riding for 2 days, tracking the signs, broken twigs, faint footprints, a shred of fabric caught on a cactus spine. Somewhere ahead, the raiders had taken her. He found her near dusk, bound to a mesquite tree on the edge of a dry arroyo. The Apache woman was proud even in her suffering. Her wrists were tied cruelly tight, her dark hair tangled with dust and twigs, her eyes fierce and watchful. When the cowboy dismounted, she lifted her chin, daring him to come closer. He could see she was exhausted, trembling from thirst, yet she refused to look away. "Easy," he murmured, drawing his knife. The blade flashed once in the dying sun as he cut through the ropes. The moment she was free, she staggered, then pushed him off with sudden strength. "Don't touch me," she hissed, voice sharp as a rattler's strike. The cowboy froze, his hand halfway outstretched. He'd only meant to steady her, but the fury in her eyes stopped him cold. She looked at him as if he were no better than the men who'd left her tied there. He took a slow step back, lowering his gaze, ashamed of how his instinct, that simple, thoughtless act of reaching, had hurt her. "You're safe now," he said quietly, though he wasn't sure she believed him. She spat into the sand, her breath ragged. "Safe. With you." He didn't answer. Words wouldn't help. Instead, he fetched his canteen, setting it down in front of her before stepping away. She hesitated, glaring at him, but her thirst betrayed her pride. She lifted the canteen and drank, though her hands shook so badly that water spilled down her chin. The cowboy turned toward the horizon, scanning for danger. The raiders could still be close. The air was cooling fast, and night would soon crawl over the desert. "We should move," he said after a long silence. She didn't reply. He could feel her distrust, sharp and heavy between them. He'd saved her life, yet she looked at him like a man who'd stolen something from her soul. He didn't blame her. Men wearing his kind of hat had brought her people nothing but pain. As they began walking toward his horse, she kept her distance. Her steps were slow, but her pride made her back straight, her chin unbowed. The cowboy led his horse by the reins, saying nothing more. The desert swallowed the last of the light. Coyotes began to call in the distance. Somewhere in that fading twilight, the cowboy glanced at her again, the proud Apache woman who refused his help, yet walked beside him into the night. And though she didn't know it, he'd already decided he would die before letting anyone hurt her again. The fire crackled low, sending tiny sparks into the chill desert air. Dawn was creeping over the horizon, painting the rocks and sand in strokes of pale gold. The Apache woman sat beside the flames, her knees drawn to her chest, watching the man who had saved her. He lay a few feet away, his face pale beneath the soot and dust, his breath shallow. The arrow had gone deep, too deep for him to keep riding after the ambush. He had fought like a man possessed, taking the hit meant for her, then firing back until the raiders scattered. She had dragged him to a hollow between 2 boulders, built the fire, and cleaned the wound as best she could. He hadn't stirred much since. Now, in the quiet of morning, regret pressed heavy against her chest. She remembered that first moment, how she'd flinched from his touch, her anger burning hotter than the sun. She had thought him arrogant, another cowboy with pity in his eyes. But she had been wrong. He hadn't looked at her with pity. He'd looked at her like someone worth saving. When he groaned, she moved quickly to his side. His hat had fallen off, and she saw for the first time how young he really was, younger than his voice, younger than his scars. His lips were dry, cracked from thirst. She uncorked the canteen and lifted it to his mouth. "Drink," she said softly. Slowly, he opened his eyes, gray, clouded with pain, and for a moment, confusion flickered there. "You stayed," he rasped. "I did." She pressed a damp cloth to his forehead. "You would have died alone." He smiled faintly, that quiet, weary smile she'd seen before. "Would have been easier for you." Her throat tightened. "No," she said after a pause. "Not anymore." Silence settled between them, broken only by the pop of the fire and the distant cry of a hawk. The wind carried the smell of mesquite and smoke, and she thought of her people, proud, fierce, unwilling to trust outsiders. She had carried that same pride like armor. But now, looking at him, she felt the weight of her anger melting away. When he tried to sit up, she pushed gently against his shoulder. "Don't move. You'll open the wound." His eyes softened. "You're bossy when you care." Her lips twitched in spite of herself. "You talk too much when you're hurt." He chuckled weakly, then winced. She held his hand to keep him still. His fingers were rough and warm, the same hand she'd slapped away days ago. Now, she didn't want to let go. As the sun climbed higher, she sat beside him, humming an old Apache tune her mother had taught her. It was a song of healing, of forgiveness. The cowboy's eyes fluttered closed, his breathing steadier with each note. She looked down at him, her heart caught between sorrow and something new, something fragile and deep. She had once hated his touch. Now, she feared the world without it.